This is the PUMA Ultra 5 Carbon, which is not only quite a lot better than the pretty awful last generation of the Ultra Ultimate, but it might also be, in my opinion, at least in the top 3 of the best speed boots PUMA have ever made. And of course, in today's video, I'll tell you why, including what the boot does well and also not so well, to hopefully help you decide if you should buy a pair in the link to Unisport right up there or not. Because as always, I'm JayMike, and this is my review of the Ultra 5 Carbon. So, as the name implies, the Ultra 5 now has a carbon fiber tooling, but we'll get to that in a bit, because one of the most important updates also comes on the upper, where PUMA have replaced the stiff Ultra Weave mesh from the last Ultra with a new open mesh upper with a thin liner. And that's a really good place to start, because this upper is impressively soft, especially knowing what we just came from on the last Ultra Ultimate. And it kind of reminds me, material-wise, of the Vapor Posit material on the Vapor 14. Only this is just softer, I feel. So if you like that boot, you'll also appreciate the Ultra Carbon here. Although it sounds a bit plasticky in hand, genuinely when I got it on my foot for the first time, it just felt as if it melted around my foot. And that means that although the boot is somewhat snug fitting, I didn't get any sort of discomfort or pressure points around my foot, because the upper material just immediately starts working with the contours of your foot. And actually, the only place I had a bit of tightness and squeezing was up top on the knit collar here. And it kind of takes me back to the very first Ultra and the Matrix Evo upper that was stupidly soft and very, very comfortable. And this, although different materials, kind of feels similar, although with just a thinner upper and a tighter fit. Now, I wouldn't call the fit tight, unless of course you go for the women's fit, which will give you a more skin-huggingly tight sensation, especially in the midfoot. But overall, I'd say that it's snug enough to feel sleek. Now, personally, I do have a little bit of excess space on the bottom part of the midfoot, which also means that I'd say that if you do have a medium to slightly wide or slightly flat foot, you're probably gonna feel pretty okay in these if you're cool with having that slightly snug fit around your foot. The forefoot is also relatively sculpted around your foot, meaning that you do get this pretty streamlined and speedy sensation that I'm looking for in a speed boot in the Ultra Carbon. So all of that is cool. However, I did find the sizing a bit strange, to be honest. Now, I went with my usual size UK6, 25 centimeters. This feels as if it runs at least a quarter, maybe even half a size long. I even took out the insole and it's not 25 centimeters, it's 26. Although the label says 25, so that's a bit weird. And of course, I could just compensate and go down half a size and be cool, but because of that relatively tight and snug fit, that just wouldn't be comfortable for me, so I'm stuck with this. And that... Now, thankfully, the heel is drastically improved from the last Ultra Ultimate, where it was also pretty dreadful, to be honest. But now you get these little ortholite foam pods that go in and grab the foot decently well. They have this nice little padding to them, and overall it feels pretty nice. It's, to be fair, it doesn't have the best lock-in in the world, but I feel that it's enough to prevent most of the heel slippage, and just for the overall fit of the boot to feel secure enough, and as if it has, I would say, decent lockdown. Unless, of course, you take advantage of these pretty deep extra lace holes that you have that you can use, and especially if you use the runner's loop, you're gonna lock yourself down on the plate and more into the heel, taking the lockdown from, I would say, decent to quite above average. So that's good. So overall, you know, big upgrade from the Ultra Ultimate, especially the softness of the upper as a big highlight for me. And then, of course, there's also the new outsole. Yep, this new speed system carbon tooling is the result of 3 years of relentless development, and some of the testing was done in an institution connected to Loughborough University. And to put it mildly, it's pretty hardcore. So what you get here is a full carbon fiber plate, which is pretty rad in itself. But then on top you have these rather long 3-legged studs called fast tracks, which have basically been designed to bite in the ground no matter which direction you push off. And when you combine that with like a snap on the outsole that is borderline ridiculous and one of the most aggressive things I've ever seen in my life, it just feels extremely responsive when you push off in these things. It's also very raw and like direct under the foot, which is great if you like that super powerful and speedy sensation just being propelled forward. But I'll also be honest, it's a lot. So it's definitely not gonna be for everyone. because the tooling is stiff and the studs are long, mate. You could kill a man with these. Now, what's also worth noting is this raised toe that you probably know from the previous generations of the Adidas X boots, which is super nice because it gives you this sensation of being automatically rolled onto your forefoot, kind of being ready. But at the same time, it also requires a little bit of like getting used to in terms of the touch, because your toes are raised a bit higher off the ground. But to sum it up, I think the Ultra Carbon here has to be one of the most extreme, aggressive, responsive things I've ever tried in my life in terms of that really hardcore, speedy sensation. Just promise me that you only use these on FG pitches, because these studs are just way too long to use on AG. And my knees are just collapsing thinking about it. They're wild.
To add to that, the outsole feels great when the pitch is softish and the studs can dig in nicely. But if it's a firmer, drier pitch, it did feel a bit unbalanced in the heel, as if I was running on the studs themselves instead of them penetrating the ground fully. So just keep that in mind.
And then there is the touch, which is probably just as you'd expect it to be. And obviously, we're talking about this very thin and sharp and, direct feel on the ball because of this thin mesh upper and liner material, which means that the ball just feels close to your foot wherever you touch it. Now, the upper here also has this slightly matte, sticky coating to it, meaning that you do get a good sense of grip on the ball. There's also a little bit of texture on the upper from the mesh, meaning that while it's definitely not Nike Gripknit levels in terms of stickiness, I do get that, enough tactility on the ball to make sure that I feel it. I get that little bit of confidence when I'm dribbling. So that's nice. Now, another thing when it comes to the touch, I mentioned around the sole. It's the raised toe that it just took a little bit of time for me to get used to. If you've ever worn an Adidas X boot with a raised toe, you'll probably recognize that at first it might feel a little bit odd, maybe even clumsy, because the toe is 1 centimeter to 1.5 centimeters higher than in a normal boot. And it just, that higher toe plus that little plastic toe bumper to basically protect the molding between the upper and the outsole, which is great for durability, it just took a little bit longer for my brain to understand. Now, it's no problem now, but I've definitely misplaced a few passes and shots while learning. I also have after, but that's for a different reason.
So if you can get used to this high toe, it might not be that annoying long term, but I still have 4 other annoying things that I feel you need to know about.
Now, first, I mentioned the sizing, because it just becomes unnecessarily difficult to get the right size if a boot that is supposed to be a UK 6 25 centimeters is in fact 26 centimeters long. I mean, why not just make it the length that it says in the label? I mean, how are we consumers supposed to know? I really think that should change. Can't be that difficult. And then there is the €280 price, which, a high price is always annoying. But to be fair, in this instance, it kind of makes sense. A carbon tooling like this is hella expensive to make. And if you want a more normal PUMA price, PUMA will also make a regular Ultra Ultimate at, the normal price range. So that's good, but yeah.
And while the heel is admittedly a major improvement and overall fits pretty nice, my slim-ish heel could have done with a slightly more snug and tight fit around this area, where I can actually fit a finger inside of the boot when I have it on. It's a minor thing, but if that annoys you, I know. And finally, there is the weight. It's 209 grams in a size Europe 42, which isn't heavy by any means, but it's also not impressively light either. And if I'm honest, I had perhaps expected just a bit more wow factor here.
But look, at the end of the day, the Ultra 5 Carbon is just so extreme, for good or bad, that it won't be for everyone. However, if you're in the niche of players who just like it wild and speedy, I feel PUMA have done something special here. It just somehow nails the very bare bone essence of what a speed boot needs to do. And sure, it will definitely be way too much for some players out there, but if you like the idea of a track spike as a football boot, it definitely should be on your list of options, I think. And you can, of course, buy it, as always, in the link to Unisport right over there. But guys, before you go and shop your brains out, tell me what you think of an Ultra with carbon and a raised toe in the comment section right down below. Also, don't forget, of course, to subscribe to the channel with the notifications on. And if you want to learn some cool skills, hit the playlist right down there. And with those words, I'll be signing off. Cheerio.